All right. So, what do you want to know about Pat Robertson and Ralph Reed that won't get me killed?
Let's do this. Well,
Okay.
I mean, I know you started working for CBN and Pat Robertson in 1985. How long did you work for CBN and Pat Robertson? What year did you stop?
I had a pretty weird session with them. I came there as a grad student in 85. I worked till it was right around 88. And I was in grad school and I was getting my master's degree in film and animation. And to graduate, I had to do a film project. And I did this little film project. Turned out the name of it was called If Your Eye Offends Thee. And I'll send you a link for it. It's about a 3-minute cartoon, but I wrote it, I directed it, I animated it, I painted the cells, I did everything. And so I couldn't do that while I was working full time
Mhm.
because the work was just, mind blowing, exhausting, traveling and stuff. So anyway, I took time off. I went back out to California, stayed with my in-laws for a few months, did my film, and then I ran into a guy in Long Beach. Pat was doing the thing out in Long Beach, and the guy who headed the department, a guy named Jim Small, uh, called me up. He'd been my boss when I was back in Virginia, and he says, "Hey man," he says, "we're working. Pat's going to be in Long Beach. I could sure use another set of hands and driver and stuff. If you want to come up and make a little bit of money," I says, "Hell yeah!" And anyway, I went up there, and I had sent a proposal to CBN during this time. And I said, you guys are missing the boat. You've got everything you need to build an animation studio on your premises. You've got the TV studios, you got the cameras, you got the editing, you got the audio, you got everything you need. And you really want to minister to kids. Nothing better than cartoons. So why don't you do this thing? So here's a plan I came up with. You give me $300,000, I'll build a little studio in one of the buildings, and we'll start doing stop motion clay animation and some computer animation. Kids love it because the dancing, remember the dancing raisins back in the day? They were a hot property. So we were going to do some stop motion stuff. So it's kind of weird how God works these things. So I'm up in Long Beach working for a couple of days doing security for Pat, and it's good to see him and things. And this guy, Rob Hartley, was the vice president of development. They were doing what was called a major donors event. And they would bring all the big high roller donors in, and they'd wine them and dine them and entertain them. And that's what this was. And so Jim and I are heading back to the hotel, and we see this guy, Rob Hartley, who I had known for several years when I worked there. And he was the money man for CBN. And he looks lost. He's like, he's out in the middle of this intersection. So I said, "Rob, get in the car." And he says, "Oh, God, can you guys give me a ride to the hotel?" I said, "We're headed there now." So Jim says, "Hey, by the way, Rob," he says, "David sent you a proposal about doing an animation studio. Have you had a chance to look at it?" He says, "No, but I promise you I will as soon as I get back." 2 weeks later, they call me up and go, "Hey, Pat just signed off on your animation studio. How soon can you get here?" 3 days drive, and I'll be there. So anyway, I came back to CBN and I started I started building the animation studio. We built it from scratch. I wrote a couple of pieces of animation, real cute little things, and we created this theme of a junkyard. And the whole message was, in fact, I wrote a song for it. It's very childlike. It's right or wrong, weak or strong, Jesus loves you the way you are. Good or bad, happy or sad, Jesus loves you the way you are. And these characters ran this junkyard, and it was all the cast out, broken, discarded things, but they were all animated pieces of junk. But the guy that ran the thing was named Gus, and he had this wisecracking dog Sport, and we interacted this and letting kids know that you don't have to be perfect. You don't, Jesus really loves you. And it was nice. So anyway, I know it's a long story, but I'm sitting in the studio one day and the phone rings. And it's Barbara Johnson, who was Pat's administrative assistant. Amazingly godly woman. I love Barbara. She's about 5'0" but I wouldn't want to tangle with her. And she calls me, says, David, she says, Pat would like to see you right away in his office. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do to screw up? Because Pat never calls anybody for good reasons. It's always generally, pardon my language, an ass chewing. So anyway, I'm like, oh man. So I told the people in the studio, I said, I got to run over to Pat's office. I don't know if I'll be back or not. So I go to Pat's office and walk in, and he comes walking out of his den. He says, David, brother. I said, yes, sir. He says, Jim Small just resigned as head of security. And he tells me there's only one person at CBN that can keep me alive, and it's you. He says, so will you step in and fill the gap and keep me alive and maybe find a replacement for Jim? And I said, I've never denied you anything, Pat. I said, I'll do it. He says, you can still do that animation stuff, but I just need you to keep me alive. I said, I got you. So I walked back to the studio, and I was now the head of security for the Christian Broadcasting Network, and I was also director of animation. Talk about a wild dichotomy. The offices were on the same floor of the corporate support building, and security is all rules and regulations, no flexibility. You do thus and so, or you get in trouble, or we take you down, or what, And then I'd walk 150 feet down the hallway. I'd go into no rules, no regulations, whatever comes to mind, just zany, wacky, cartoony. And I just was finding this schizophrenic life. So that was my life for a couple of years. I was doing both, and I was holding animation meetings with my 9mm gun strapped to my hip, and that cut down on a lot of pushback from my coworkers. But that's how it came to be, and I think Pat was a little easier on me than he was with a typical, like for Jim Small, because I think he felt beholding to me because I really bailed him out of a jam. Because I had tried to find, I tried to find replacements for me fairly quickly. I interviewed a bunch of Secret Service agents, retiring Secret Service agents. I mean, you're not going to find better security than bodyguards in Secret Service. I had a half dozen of them come in. I interviewed them. I told them about how Pat's quirks were and everything. Half of them said, I don't want to touch it. I don't want you. He says, you got no walls. We had about almost 100-acre parcel of land where the ministry sat. And there were 2 guard shacks on the roads to get in, but there were no fences. I mean, people wander out of that property all the time. So the Secret Service looked at it, no, I'm not controlling this area. Too many people can just walk in here and shoot him. So I couldn't find a replacement.
Right.
So I was just kind of like ball and chain. I was strapped to him because I couldn't just walk off and leave him uncovered. But that's the legacy story, and finally, and it speaks about Pat. And we were on a private jet one night coming back from an event. And man, I was burned out, and he was back in the back reading his Wall Street Journal. And I walked back to him. I said, you have a minute? He said, sure, brother. And I said, I'm spent. I said, I got to either give up security or animation because I'm working 80-hour weeks and I'm not top peak performance with you. And I don't want anything to happen. It's typical Pat Robertson, keeping in mind, I'd just given him 3 years of my life. He looks over his glasses at me. He says, well, you're pretty talented in that animation stuff, and I can get any big lug to keep me alive. So why don't you just drop out of security, find me somebody and try. And I thought, you SOB, are you calling me a big lug? If you could have gotten any big lug, why didn't you get him 3 years ago, And I thought, I can't shoot him on the plane because they'll know it was me. So anyway, I was pissed off, really. It's like, God. And that was typical Pat Robertson. He wanted everything perfect, yesterday, and cheap. And if you strayed outside those little parameters, he'd wind you up, boy. I mean, he was. I watched. In fact, it was at the event at Long Beach. where his daughter Anne was in charge of setting up the whole thing for the major donors. He reamed her so bad. He found something he didn't like at the major dinner. He reamed her so bad she broke down in tears. This was his daughter. This was his
Wow.
daughter. And I walked up to Anne. I liked Anne. She was about the most natural Robertson there was of the four kids. And I said, Anne, you all right? She says, there's just no pleasing him, and I just killed myself on this event. And he just harps on the things that he doesn't like and everything. And I said, well, Anne, I said, you want me to shoot him? I said, for you, I'll do it. I said, I'll make it look like an accident too. She laughed. She said, oh, it's really tempting offer. I said, oh, I'm sorry, Anne. I said, you do a fabulous job. But that's the kind of guy he was. He's like he was like a race car traveling 200 miles an hour down the road of life. He didn't worry about the potholes. He didn't worry about the pedestrians he killed. He didn't worry about the traffic laws he broke. He just wanted to get down the road to the next great accomplishment.
Man. So I guess one of my biggest questions, because we've talked in email about some of the stuff that I've dealt with and gone through
Right.
when it comes to, the church and
Sure.
Christianity and stuff. Like, did it at all affect your perception of Christianity? Did it ever get hard defending and protecting a man that people respect so much as fans that watch him on TV, but in real life, back behind the scenes, he's the exact opposite.
Yeah. Um, I would be brutally honest with you. There's almost like a adrenaline aphrodisiac type sense when you go to some of these big events. We were in
Mm-hmm.
Anaheim at the Anaheim Convention Center back in the day, and he was the guest speaker at a 10,000 women attendee Women's Aglow Fellowship. I mean, the audience there was 99.8% female. And Pat was in his heyday. Pat's people don't know about Pat Robertson. He's about 6'3" 3.5 inches. He was a former Golden Glove boxer in the Marine Corps. I'm not bent that way, but I thought he was a pretty handsome man, and and very charming, very gracious in public. And when we walked into that Anaheim Convention Center, and he got up on the platform to give a speech, honest to God, it was probably the closest thing I would have ever compared to Michael Jackson getting up on a concert stage. It was deafening, standing ovation for 2 or 3 minutes. And I thought, my God, and and I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, we're something. I'm keeping him alive. Yeah. I'm the handsome bodyguard standing here, my hand on my gun, kill y'all. Anyway, so there was a slight ego thing in going and meeting with dignitaries, meeting presidents of foreign countries, captains of industry. I mean, I've got to meet a lot of interesting, famous people. But when the glitz and glamour wore off, it was just hard, man. It was like uh, you know, his big thing. I learned very quickly from Jim Small, and Jim Small's an incredible man. I'd like you to meet him someday. He's living down in Ocala, Florida, playing golf and retired. But best lesson he told me was, he said, if Pat Robertson asks you a question and you don't know the answer, do not just tell him, I don't know, and walk away, because you'll be out of a job. You tell him, I don't know, but I will go find out. And then you go find out and you come right back to him with the answer. And it proved to be true. There were times when he would say, uh, uh, you know, what's cool? What time's this meeting? I said, I don't know. He goes, what am I paying you for? I said, I'll find out, sir. And I went and got it. And there was the story I was going to tell you, and it'll come back to me. Anyway, he very demanding, just perfectionist. You would do quite often when he was pre-running for president, when he officially made his announcement as an official candidate, the Secret Service took him over. And we had no choice on that. But before then, when he was working under Americans for Robertson, it was us. We were doing with about 3 or 4 guys what the Secret Service was doing for George Bush with about 50. And there were screw ups sometimes. We didn't have the same gravitas as Secret Service did. We'd walk in and show them our badge from CBN Security, and they go, "What the hell is that? Where'd you buy that thing?" Secret Service walks in, shows them their badge. You go, "What would you like? You want to cordon this off? We'll do that for you." And the other downside was there were a lot of people that didn't know who Pat Robertson was, especially the farther you tended to get out to the West Coast. Now, in the Eastern Seaboard area, he's very popular, but there were times I'd go out there to do an advance in California. I go, "Hi, I'm Dave Wilcox. I'm with Pat Robertson, where he's going to be doing an event here tomorrow night. Just wanted to do an advance on it, see where he's going to be." "Pat who?" I go, "Wow. Pat Robertson, 700 Club, CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network." "Oh, I think I've seen him. I don't know, So it's wild, But Pat wanted everything to be red carpet. He wanted everything to go smoothly. He didn't want any delays. There's one time, and this is where his ego was. I was taking he and his wife out to the Norfolk International Airport. They were going somewhere, and they're going to have the fly commercial, which was very, very rare. Generally, they flew on a big CBN corporate jet. So I was taking Pat and his wife, Dee Dee. They're both deceased now. I was taking them out to the airport, and Dee Dee was always late, always late. My God, that woman was late. And we got to the airport, and we pulled up the curbside 5 minutes before departure time. We hadn't been through security. We hadn't found the gate. We hadn't, got the tickets, anything. We pull up, and I was always in a suit and tie and everything. And Pat goes, "David, brother, run ahead and tell the pilot to hold the plane for me." And I looked at him in the back of the car. I says, "You're kidding me." He goes, "No, go tell him to hold the plane. We're going to be on that plane." I said, "Pat," I said, "a couple problems with your request there." I said, "I'm probably going to get shot by Norfolk police when I run through the security checkpoint with my handgun." I said, "Secondly, if the pilot's a Democrat," I said, "he's going to back out of that gate real quick, knowing you're coming." I said, "So give me a break." And Dee Dee's like, "Pat, you can't ask him to do that." And I said, but that's where his mindset was. It was like the whole world had to stop for Pat Robertson, And it just in fact, in Anaheim, and tell me if I'm prattling on too long, but we were in Anaheim Convention Center doing that 10,000 Women's Aglow. And I had a friend of mine, Glenn Massey, who had worked for a private detection agency, and Glenn was best security backup you could have. And Glenn was going to be our driver. And well, back in those days, the Anaheim Convention Center was a round building. It was just a round convention center. Now it's all spacey looking and stuff. And so Glenn and I went to the advance, and I said, "Okay, Glenn, here's the deal. We're coming in this door. We're going to go up on the riser. I'll be down in front of the riser to intercept anybody who makes a rush." I said, "Pat's going to finish speaking about 25 minutes. He wants to be out of here before the applause dies down, so he's not going to pose for any pictures. I'll get up on the dais, take him down these steps, go through the door, go across the hallway, the exterior door. That's where I want the car, right there." He goes, "You got it." I said, "Be there with the door open. We'll shove him in the car. We'll be on the freeway before the applause dies down." Sounded great, because he was doing 2 speeches, one at around noontime and then one 8 o'clock that night. We get there, perfect, get up on the dais. Pat does his speech. Crowd's going crazy. They're standing ovation. I go up and grab him, walk him down the steps, walk through the first door, 2, 3 steps across the hallway, and I'm getting ready to fling open the doors and be a real hero to Pat, because I got him out of here before the applause died. Oh, swing open the doors. There's no car. There's no car. And I made the noise like a fresh jar of peanuts opening up. And I was like, oh my God, where the hell's Glenn? And Pat's yelling at me, where's the car? His voice would get real high when he was yelling, where's the car? David, where's the car? Because 10,000 women are now filing out of the convention center. And it was like Michael Jackson was in the middle of a bunch of teeny boppers,
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, oh man, I am so fired. I should just shoot him and go. And fortunately, our hotel was about a block and a half away. And I'm on the radio to Glenn. He's not answering me. And I thought, oh, something really screwed up. So I said, Pat, just come with me. We got to walk fast. So we were walking past all these women. Fortunately, we were getting by them before they really knew who it was, and we got to the hotel. I got him to his room. And then finally he says, well, what happened? I said, classic. I said, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out. I said, just stay in your room. So I went down the hallway, and here comes Glenn running around the corner looking like he's a maniac. I said, Glenn, where the hell were you? He says, I was just on the other side of the building. I was 180 degrees turned around. I said, oh, God, Glenn. I said, we got another thing tonight. I said, if it doesn't go well, I said, I'll be out of a job. And I said, I don't want that. So I went and told Pat, and I said, Glenn was on the wrong side of the building. We had worked it out, but it was an easy mistake because there's real no landmarks to judge it by. And he looked at me and he says, all right. He says, you got one more chance tonight. I want to be in that car and on the way out before the applause ends. If not, I'm not going to be good for you. I said, yes, sir. And I got with Glenn. I said, I want you to go to a business supply store, get those little sticky red fluorescent dots they put on file holders, and get a set of those and come back. I want you to put one on the base of the door, very nondescript, just at the bottom of the door. And when you come to pick us up, if you don't see that friggin' dot, you're at the wrong door. He goes, got it. Fast forward, Pat did his speech. We got off the dais, walked out, flew open the doors. The car door was open. Pat got on the car. 2.5 seconds, we're down on getting onto the freeway. And Pat leans up and starts pounding on the seat. He goes, now that's the way it's supposed to work. I said, yes, sir. And I sat back. I punched Glenn in the leg. I said, good job, man. Good job. But that's the stress you were under with this guy. So anyway.
Wow. I mean, from everything I've read, when there was a point where he really, really, really had a heart for ministry.
Oh, yeah.
His heart was in the right place. He meant well, and just over time, I don't know if the ego got the best of him. Did you see that change developing in him over the years, or was it just like one day it's different?
There's one critical day, and there's one critical decision he made. And I've told this story before, it's in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sitting in the company car. We had driven a dark blue Lincoln Town car. That's what Pat preferred to be driven around in. He hated Cadillacs, and he would not be set foot dead in a limousine. So we used this big Lincoln Town car. I was in the shotgun seat. My second in command in security was driving. Great guy, John Norris. In the back of the car are 3 people. Dead center is Pat Robertson. On his right side is a guy named Mark Nuttall, who was the head of his campaign for president. And on the other side was the guy, Rob Hartley, I told you about in Long Beach, the money man for CBN. He was vice president of development. I'm sitting in the front of the car and I'm listening. I'm not saying a word. I'm not supposed to say a word. I'm just supposed to look ominous and foreboding. So I'm sitting here and they're talking about the 3.5 million names on the CBN donor database. It was 3.5 million people. They're mailing information, their contact information. They were all bona fide people who were donating money to the ministry, tax exempt money to the ministry. Mark Nuttall, who I thought was just kind of creepy. I didn't like the guy from the get-go. I don't know what he's doing now. Um, he's telling me, or he's telling Pat, says, Pat, we Americans for Robertson's going broke, basically. We got to get some money. And you got to give us access to this CBN donor base. It's 3.5 million people that love you. They'll give us their money. You're too young to remember the 1940s movies, romantic comedies, where when the hero, the male, is sitting there and they got a little angel and a little devil on their shoulders, and they're going, the devil's like, "You gotta do it my way, and the angel's like, "Oh, do not stray there." Anyway, that's what it was like. You got Nuttall the devil and Rob Hartley the angel, and they're whispering to Pat, and it's like a tennis match. They're going back and forth, back and forth. Nuttall's saying, "You got to give us the donor base." 3.5 million people. Rob Hartley, very godly man, very brilliant man. He says, Pat, if you do that, it's going to hurt your ministry something fierce. He says, here's why. He says, you got people out there, they're giving their last $20 they got over the month to CBN right now. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to start getting mailing things from Americans for Robertson. A couple things are going to happen. One of them, they're going to go, hey, Mildred, Pat Robertson's running for president. Instead of sending that CBN our $20 this month, let's send it to Americans for Robertson. They need some money. Okay? Or they're going to get this Americans for Robertson literature and they're going to go, what the hell's Pat Robertson doing in politics? You're supposed to separate church and state. That's it, Mildred. No more money for CBN. Pat Robertson wants to go be president, then screw him. I'm not sending him my money. Okay, two things there are going to happen. That's what happened. They were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and there was this what seemed an eternity of a period of silence. And Pat said, "Give them the list," and it was done. It was done. I felt like somebody just gut punched me. And I turned to John Norris and he looked at me and he went, oh my God. So it was done. And some of the details are in the book. And here's what happened, Reggie. It makes me sick. Rob Hartley was prophetic. That's exactly what happened. Donations dropped off so quickly, so abruptly, so overtly that when Pat came back and took a tally of what was going on, 630 hardworking Christian workers for the Christian Broadcasting Network lost their jobs because there was no money.
Mm-hmm.
It was all going to politics.
Right.
And I don't hate to say it. I will say it. The minute Pat Robertson gave away his birthright, he did a couple of things. He renounced his Baptist ministerial position. He separated himself from the Southern Baptist Church where he was ordained a minister because he didn't want people in politics thinking he was going to be in the White House and then force everybody to become a Baptist. And people thought that way. So he renounced his ministerial position, and then he gave the list away and prostituted the database for politics. And then it was all over. And I told him one day, I was walking with him, and I said, and I wasn't when Pat asked me to take over security for him, it was kind of very liberating because I could walk away anytime I wanted to. If he was too much of a hard ass for me, I quit. You're on your own. See ya. Have a nice life. But I loved the man. I would have taken a bullet for him, but I also talked very candidly with him. I told him the truth. He didn't like hearing it a lot, but I believed in telling him the truth. And I told him, Pat, I said, there's an old saying, you dance with the one that brought you to the dance. And you didn't get to where you are with the CBN ministry through politics. You got here through ministry. You've been doing some great, wonderful things with the ministry, and now you're kicking it to the curb and you're going to follow this politics. Politics is filthy. It's a filthy business. I don't know anybody that's in politics that's really a good person anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened was he sold the birthright and he walked away from it. 630 people, hardworking, underpaid ministry workers were gone. And Pat got humbled. This is what happened. He got back, and I'll refer to Jim Small again because Jim was heading up the department at that time. Pat got back, and he found things in just total disarray. They were hemorrhaging money. He got a big legal pad. He used to like to write on big yellow legal pads, and he was left-handed, and he'd write this big 1.5 inch size letters and stuff. And he made the rounds, and it's in the book. The book can explain it better than I can. But he walked around the CBN complex and the business and the buildings. He would stop workers, and they knew who he was. He's the big kahuna. And he'd say, "What is your name? What is your department? Who do you work for? And what do you do here?" And they go, "Well, my name's Sally Smith, and I work in accounts receivable, and I work for so and so." And he'd make a note, and he'd do that. And at the end of the day, he would go and he would send the list over to Barbara Johnson, his admin assistant. They would type up the names and the information, and then Jim Small, God bless him, got the horrible job of walking around and telling all those people they were fired. Yeah.
Wow.
And they hadn't done anything wrong. They were paying the price for the ego decision to run for president and the abandonment of the ministry. Because when I came to CBN, I was proud. I was proud to represent Pat Robertson. They were doing some incredible things. They were doing literacy programs. They were feeding the underprivileged. If there was a storm down in Louisiana and it took FEMA 10 days to get down there, CBN was down there within 24, 48 hours with a mobile kitchen, feeding people, giving them water. And I was a big contributor. I wasn't making great money at the ministry, but I was given $2,500 a year. Remember the 2,500 club? Because you got the 700 club, 1,000 club, 2,500 club, all the way up to founders, which is like 10,000 a year or something like that. And man, I started things after politics. I started seeing what was going on with the money and stuff. I was like, man, I could use that 2,500 somewhere else, just like those other people thought, So, yeah, I mean that was the fork in the road, was politics, and then what happened? He got back. The ministry was in shambles, and he panicked. And I don't know if God gave him a vision or he came up with it himself, but he said, "Oh my God," he says, "I left for a couple of months for politics, and the ministry crumbled. What's going to happen when I die? What's going to happen when the captain's no longer driving the ship?" So he started panicking, and he started dealing with some pretty unscrupulous people on these get-rich-quick schemes. There was multi-level marketing. There was diamond mining in Zaire. There was gold mining in Liberia, with two of the most nefarious despots, killing dictators ever been on the planet, and he partnered up with them. And I mean, I was on the first trip to Zaire, and we met President Mobutu over there. He'd been invited over there, and Pat left with a hand-signed contract. Remember I told you about the legal pads? Pat wrote out a handwritten contract, and President Mobutu, and Google him, President Mobutu Sese, S-E-S-E, his last name is Seko, S-E-K-O. Mobutu Sese Seko, one of the most brutal dictators in the history of Africa. Pat was his business partner. And Pat had freedom to go and start a diamond mine in Zaire. And then, Reggie, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
He there was an out. I know this is very disjointed, but it fits together. There
Mhm.
was a war going on in Liberia, not in Liberia, in Rwanda, and people were being murdered by the hundreds, by the thousands, and they
Mhm.
were fleeing there. Fled into Zaire. About 1 million people fled. Their choice was stay in. Uh, God, I forgot the name of the country now. Stay in Rwanda and be killed, or get across the border and live in a dirt field in Zaire and hope somebody gives you some food and water. 1 million people came into Zaire. Now follow me on this. Cholera broke out in that encampment. People were dying of cholera by the hundreds daily. Doctors Without Borders came in. They were overwhelmed. I mean, they were doing their best. They were doing some good work. Pat gets on the 700 Club. I'm not proud of this, but he got in the 700 Club. They had a thing called um, Operation Blessing. They're the ones that would go down and feed people in the
Mhm.
hurricane zones.
Yeah.
Pat got on the 700 Club a few consecutive days and told people about the cholera outbreak in Zaire, and we've got to do something. Operation Blessing's got to do something to help these poor people. So I need you to send me $25 extra, and we're going to raise some money. And he came up with this grandiose plan. It's all laid out in the book. I'm not doing a very good job explaining to it because it's so integrated. He said he wanted to send 100 plus doctors into Zaire. He wanted to send medication to treat all the people for cholera. He wanted to send food. He wanted to send water. We got this mechanism, Operation Blessing. They'll be there. They'll do it. Send me the money, and we're going to do it. We're going to make an airstrip so we can fly in the supplies and everything. And people sending millions, estimated about $8 million. Guess where most of it was going, Reggie?
To him.
It was going to pay for his diamond mining operations nearby. The pilot of the airplanes, Pat bought 3 old Vietnam era airplanes that were kind of cargo planes that could hold a lot of supplies under the guise that they were going to ship in medicine, water, and
Mhm.
stuff to Zaire. There's a photo in the book showing them unloading a dredge, a diamond mining dredge, out of the back of the plane, the big name Operation Blessing on the tail fin of the plane. And they spent a good 80 to 90% of that money that was given on his diamond mine. He set up a company, Reggie, called the African Development Corporation. He was the sole owner and operator of this firm. He set it up overseas somewhere because the tax laws are better, and that's where the money was going, to pay for this diamond mining operation. The Doctors Without Borders. In fact, there's a video. I can't remember the name of it. Somebody did a video about this, and it's very, very incriminating. You could probably Google it, but Doctors Without Borders said it was embarrassing. CBN. Oh, and Pat was holding up pictures of people, you know, giving medicine out and everything. They weren't our pictures. They were the pictures from Doctors Without Borders. CBN didn't send 100 doctors. They sent 7 workers, and all they were doing was handing out aspirin or Tylenol and Bibles. And the people got fed up. They said, "We don't want Bibles. We want food and medicine and water."
Well,
You know,
yes.
wouldn't you think? And then one of the guys who actually worked for Operation Blessing, and they were a good organization. They're just following orders. One of the guys said, "We got enough Tylenol to treat every man, woman, and child in Zaire, but you don't treat cholera with Tylenol." They sent no medicine that was going to be beneficial to treat Tylenol. They used the pictures from somebody else to present the picture that they were on the ground, boots on the ground, treating these poor people. So this is the kind of shenanigans that were going on after politics. And he started a telemarketing company. You got time for one more story?
Absolutely.
Do I sound horrible? But I'm telling you the truth.
No, you're good. This is what
Pat and
this
I,
is for.
Pat and I were having lunch in the uh, God, what's the name of that hotel? It's a big Lowe's Anatole Hotel in Dallas. It's where we always stayed. Real nice facility. And we were having lunch one day, and he's sitting in the little restaurant in the lobby area, and he was in the eating a lot of cantaloupe back in those days. So he's sitting there eating half a cantaloupe, and I'm just hoping nobody comes up and kills him, you know. And he says, "Oh, by the way, David, brother," he says, "I'm going to start a multi-level marketing company." What? I'm thinking, what's that got to do with the ministry? And he says, "Well, I got approached by five of the best telemarketing professionals in the country. They're all at the top of their pyramids in multi-level marketing." And he said, and they're going to come to work for CBN, and they love the Lord. That was Pat's mantra, man. If you said, "I love the Lord," he was like, "I'll do whatever you want. What do you want to be a vice president?" If you say, if that was his buzzword, he says, "Well, they told me they love the Lord, and they're going to make a lot of money for CBN, and they're going to," and I sat back. I said, "Pat," I said, "You probably think I'm just a dumb security guard, but I got to ask you a question." I said, "Isn't the goal of a good telemarketer to get to the top of their pyramid and stay there? Because everybody underneath them is feeding them. They're on the
Mhm.
gravy train." I
Yeah.
said, "Let me ask you a question. Why would any person, much less five of them, who are legitimately at the top of their markets in multi-level marketing, abandon all of that and come to a startup with the Christian Broadcasting Network? Because your track record's not that good if they've done their research." Because Pat started a lot of businesses that just black holed. Everybody thinks he's a great businessman. He's got more failures than he had successes. But anyway, he looks at me and he couldn't really respond. I said, "Here's what I'm going to do. When we get back to CBN," I said, "I'm going to run background checks on all your superstars people." "What are you going to do that for?" I said, "It's my job to keep you safe physically and professionally. If you're going to have them in the building, you're going to allow them to write checks. You're going to allow them to represent you." I said, "I want to know who we're dealing with." Well, he says, "Well, do what you got to do. I'm telling you, they're superstars." And he went back to his melon. So we got back to CBN. I ran background checks on the five of them. It took about 2 weeks. I got them back from Equifax, big overnight envelope. I opened it up, and man, it was like Christmas morning for me. It was, oh God, it was so good. I started looking at them. They had indictments for fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, grand theft, misrepresentation. I mean, it was like a rogues gallery, and none of them were pure. So I
So,
told I walked across the hall to Pat's office. And man, I must have been just walking on air. And I asked Barbara, "Is the boss in?" He poked his head out of his office. What's going on, brother?" I said, "Pat," I said, "I got those background checks back on your multi-level marketing superstars." "Well, what'd you find out?" Give me this big, shit-eating grin. And I said, "Well, read it for yourself." He got his glasses on and he started reading them. He grabbed me by the collar. He pulled me close. He says, "I want all five of them off the property in the next 30 minutes. I said, "It'll be a pleasure." And I was allowed to go around and fire them all, tell them, "You need to get your stuff together. Services are no longer needed." But that's the
oh,
type of it was going to be promises of quick money, easy money, multi-level marketing. We'll ride that train forever. He started a multi-level marketing called Kayla Vita and Benefits Plus, and it collapsed and ruined the lives of hundreds of people. He was all. I used to tease people. I said, "Yeah, his Pat's motto is ready, fire, aim." He's always going off half cocked. "Oh, Pat, I got this great business deal. One of the guys from used to be a professor at Regent University came to him and says, "Pat, I got this great business opportunity. We can go out to California. There's a oil refinery, hasn't been in business for 10 years. I've worked the numbers on it. We can get that for a song, sink a couple of $1 million into it, and then we can take oil off the coast of Long Beach through tankers and make gasoline." And this is when the gasoline crisis was on. So they were going to, I mean, they saw dollar signs. They pumped in tens of millions of dollars before they realized that this refinery was the worst EPA violating refinery in the state of California. It needed so much fixing just to get it up and make it street legal. They'd never refined one drop of oil, and they wasted 10, 15, 20 million dollars trying to work through it. And then Pat ended up getting sued by the lawyers that he had trying to work the deal because, they welched on it and stuff. So it's just, there's plenty of stories like that in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the book's transitional. I'll just plug the book a little bit. The book is absolutely transitional. It started off, a professor I had at Regent told me, he said, at the grad school, he says, "You need to write a book about all these funny, quirky things that Pat does. You're a good writer." I said, "Oh yeah, well, I'll think about it." I started writing it, and then I started digging deeper and remembering this and remembering that. And I said, if I just can't tell the sugar-coated stuff, I got to tell the truth. And the book's going to outlive me. I don't have that many years left. So there came up, I explained it in the foreword that it's a transitional book, and the dividing line was politics. And after that, Pat had branched off, and he was no longer, he was in a panic. He was always looking for that rainbow, the pot of gold, quick thing. Diamond mining in Zaire, gold mining in Liberia with Charles Taylor. Google that guy. He got tried by the World Court for crimes against humanity.
Wow.
He killed hundreds of his own citizens. And Pat went in business partnership with him. Now tell me, how does a really godly man do that? Aren't we known by the company we keep?
Absolutely.
So to get back to your perspective on things, which I really admire and respect, I had this epiphany. It was like, I don't need to follow a godly man to be close to God. I don't need to go sit in a brick and mortar building 2 hours and listen to some crotchety old dude point his bony finger at me and tell me I'm a sinner. And then he's probably clicking his mouse button watching porn that night, because 60% of active pastors at that time were addicted to porn, And I'm like, I don't need all that. Because people say, well, didn't it turn you off to God? No, it reinforced it. I can go right to him. I do it every morning in the shower. I get the hot water running on me because the devil hates water, and he'll leave me alone for 10 minutes. And I'm just saying, I'm thanking him. I think, I was just telling my wife today, these astronomers are saying there's light traveling, get this, 10 million light years away from Earth, just striking us now. How big is the universe? Light travels at 182,000 miles per second, and it's 100 million years away. And it's just hitting us. And we've got the audacity to think we've got a lock on God. That scares me. So I talk to him daily. I always ask him for favor. God, another day, could you please give me favor in everything that my hands touch? Protect me, protect my wife, heal my wife. She's got some illnesses right now. I just go down the list, and I don't have to rattle a tambourine. I don't have to wave flags. I don't have to have a 5-piece band behind me. It's a very intimate thing to be in tune with God. You don't need any special equipment. You should probably be dressed, but I don't know. You have clothes on. But you know what I'm saying? And what I've discussed with you, very short snippets, it seems like you hit that threshold too.
Mhm.
You kind of, am I missing the mark?
No, not at all. I went through that a lot when
Yeah.
I left the Bible college I was at, where I was so it became very um more I don't know the word I can't the word space in me now, but like more what you can and cannot do more than what's in your heart.
Right.
And when I started being very vocal about that, and after I left, I was even more vocal and obviously not at a good place, but
Yeah.
it seems like that, and you're probably, I know you're dealing with that from the CBN people right now as well with the books.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it seems like when you're outspoken about things that you see wrong, they fire right back at you. And I
Uh-huh.
got so much heat
Oh, yeah.
from that group of people. Some of them still have me blocked or still won't talk to me. A lot of them I've made up with because I
Oh,
was
yeah.
wrong with a lot of things too. But it can be tough when people that you were so close to for so long
Yeah.
kind of turn on you and give you heat because you're open, honest, and kind of say it how it is.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Put, I'm not a big social media guy. I never was. I mean, I got a
Smart.
few Facebook friends and stuff. So I put a blurb out and I said, I'm very proud and happy to announce I've just written two new books, one about Pat Robertson, one about Ralph Reed.
Hmm.
And boy, boy, I, I got
Firestorm.
I got one guy, he actually worked for security, uh, told me I was a Judas, hope I enjoyed my blood money. And I started responding back to him because I'm an idiot and I don't realize it's just social media and it's toxic. And I told him, I said, Jerry, I said, do you think you know the real Pat Robertson? Because Jerry, I think, drove Pat to the airport maybe 5 times during his time there. He was a security officer. I said, Jerry, I venture to say I've spent more time with Pat Robertson in one afternoon than you did in all your trips to the airport. I said, the man you saw on 700 Club and the man that I dealt with 24 hours a day, not the same people. And he's not pure. He's not flawless, because they were saying, Pat is such a godly man. And how dare you attack this godly man? Hey, he puts his pants on just like I do, you know? And I had another person. Oh, yeah, she was in fact, she had been on a part-time host of the 700 Club. I really liked her. I thought she's really sharp. And I knew her sister very well, and they were good friends of mine. And God, she wrote me a scathing thing on Facebook. I am so disappointed in you. You have just. Blah blah blah. And I wrote her back. I said, Kathy, I said, you're certainly entitled to your opinion, but why don't you go and contact the 630 people that lost their jobs as a result of Pat's ego getting him into politics
Mhm.
and see how they feel about him?
Yeah.
Crickets. The truth will set you free. And that's all I've been doing is I've been telling people the truth. Everything in my books is very, very deeply researched. It's either personal knowledge by me, some by my best friend Jim Small, who headed the department, knew Pat as intimately as I did. A lot of it's through research I've done. The Ralph Reed book too. Everything in that book. That's another thing. Ralph Reed, he should have gone to prison. Everybody thinks he's the last bastion of God's representative here on earth and conservative Christianism. Biggest friggin' crook on the planet. He committed. I have proof in my book that he committed fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. What else? Destruction of evidence. Probably a few RICO Act violations. All the people he did that with ended up getting convicted and went to prison. He never even had to testify. The fix was in. Okay, so I don't hold Ralph Reed in very high regard. And if he wants to sue me, bring it on, because I'd love to get access to his corporate records, and see if he's paid tax money. He laundered a couple of $160,000 checks through a post office box in Richmond. He set up a bogus business called the Faith and Family Coalition, I think he called it, and something like that. And all it was a PO box in Richmond. And he hired a former Regent student. A side story: the Regent student ended up getting convicted later on of child porn. He spent 6 years in prison. So that tells you what kind of people he was dealing with. Americans for Tax Reform is in business right now. It's run by a guy named Grover Norquist. Grover Norquist was a good college buddy of Ralph Reed and a guy named Jack Abramoff. Norquist admitted laundering money for Ralph Reed. That never happened to him.
Wow.
And then I have two copies of 2 checks in the book for $160,000 a piece that were supposed to get paid. Ralph Reed was supposed to get paid for protecting Indian gambling casinos. They laundered the money, and it got paid to Ralph Reed for those services. And a few years ago, he was raising money for the Christian Coalition, telling people that gambling is a cancer. It's destroying families. It's stealing food from the mouths of babes. And fast forward a few years later, after he's gone from the Christian Coalition, gambling made him a millionaire, protecting Indian gambling casinos in Louisiana and Texas. It's all in the book. The checks are in the book. The emails are in the book. The correspondence is in the book.
Man.
And people are like, hey, Ralph Reed's going to be on TV telling the Republican Party what to do. It's like, I wouldn't let that guy tell me what the temperature was outside. He'd probably lie about it. He's the most, the Huffington Post called him one of the most hypocritical people of our times. Ralph Reed.
So I think with Pat, I think obviously at one point his heart was in the right place, and he was a really good person at one point in the beginning.
Yep.
But the devil can get anybody, and that's obviously what happened.
Yeah.
But I know you've got a lot of heat from people at CBN. Have you had any? What about the family of Pat? Have they had any interaction with you or any opinion on the book at all, or with you talking?
Well, it's funny because I just was talking to my wife about this. God, I think this morning or yesterday. When I first went to work for Pat, they have you sign a document, a non-disclosure agreement. And basically, it's a gag order. It says once you leave work here and during work, you cannot reveal any secrets, any details, blah, 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 blah. Now, I was working as the director of animation at CBN. I did not sign a non-disclosure agreement. Plus, I was called personally by Pat Robertson to come to his office. That entire interaction lasted about 90 seconds. He told me, Jim Small says you're the only guy who can keep me alive. Will you do that? Yes, I will. Okay, I'll take care of it. Boom, I was done. I was now the head of security. I'm not bound by anything. And now Pat Robertson's dead. That removes all of that to another level. So I like the Robertson family. Anne was my favorite. She worked there for many years. I think she's still back working there. She was head of the major donors and headed up CBN Travel. Funny gal, very nice. Elizabeth is his oldest daughter. She lived in Texas. She was a smart one. She distanced herself from CBN. She lived in Texas. Mm-hmm. Very rarely did we ever see Elizabeth. Gordon, his youngest son, was an attorney. Gordon's smart. His heart's not really there. And quite frankly, he doesn't have the draw, the audience draw that Pat did. the charisma, whatever. But
Sure.
Gordon's smart. And then Tim, poor Tim, he's the oldest son. When Pat ran for president, Pat dubbed Tim his successor for the C700 Club, and threw him on the air. And I can't count how many times Tim did the old deer in the headlights look at the camera, like it just so awkward. I felt so sad for him because he was trying to keep the ministry going, and a lot of people were calling him Howdy Doody and stuff because and he just finally said, he was very candid. He says, how would you like to have to work for my dad like this? You know, so he felt for Tim. He was in the lifeboat bailing. Um, Gordon's smart. Gordon's tech savvy. I don't even know if 700 Club's still on the air right now, broadcast wise. Gordon was phasing it to do streaming, video on demand, maybe an hour a day and stuff. And it would be cheap to produce. You have a TV station, you got to buy time on all the stations. So they may have already made that transition. I mentioned in the book that somebody did a study of personality driven ministries, ones that were driven by the Jerry Falwells and the Billy Grahams and the Oral Roberts and Pat Robertson, all the big, powerful Christian personalities that were heading up these ministries. 100% of the time, when the head gets chopped off the snake, the ministry crumbles. They can't bring somebody in to fill that same spot. So I'm predicting probably is what's going to happen is that'll happen to CBN. But CBN's kind of smart. They got Regent University over there. Regent's a great grad school. Whatever they're doing, keep it up. So they may just absorb the buildings and absorb whatever. I don't see the CBN 700 Club in its current state or when it was when Pat they're functioning very well along because they got nobody driving the bus.
So after you were gone, did you pay attention to anything Pat had been saying on the show or any of there's obviously the clips of some of the stuff he would say the last few years that were obviously very controversial. Did you pay attention to any of that at all? And if you did, what were your thoughts when you would see that stuff?
Interestingly, I was still married to the woman that I came to CBN with. She was a producer for the 700 Club. That's why we came there. She had always she wanted to get a master's degree at Regent. It was then called CBN University. And she wanted to work for the 700 Club. And I had retired from the police department. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So, yeah, let's go to Virginia. I already had 3 or 4 college degrees. I'll go back and get my master's degree. I'll add degree number 5 to the kitty. So we came back and she got her job with the 700 Club. And now we've been divorced several years. And as far as I know, she's probably still working there, And in fact, the program that they stored when Pat passed away, they had like an hour-long documentary. She produced that. She's a very good producer, just a horrible wife. So, but when after I left, we would watch this show because my wife's stories were on it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I sit there going, shaking my head, like, what is he saying? And in fact, there's one I was talking on a podcast last week, and this might be a good one to close out because it had to do with what Pat was saying on the air. Back, I can't remember the exact date, but there was a Hurricane Gloria coming into the Eastern Seaboard. We're kind of like in a part of Hurricane Alley here, And it was a 700 Club. Pat was on the air. The senior executive producer of the 700 Club came up during a commercial break or when they were showing a tape of something, and he gave Pat this note, and he says, and it was a weather report. and it said that Hurricane Gloria is tracking to hit Virginia Beach, Virginia. And it was like a category 4, category 5. It was a big storm. So Pat gets on, comes back on the air. So, ladies and gentlemen, and you're gonna have to get the book if you want to see the entire sequence because it's long and verbose. But anyway, he gets up and he starts leaning into the camera and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been handed this news flash, and Hurricane Gloria is on a track to hit us here at Virginia Beach in CBN. CBN's located in Virginia Beach. 700 clubs here. We're here right now. If that storm comes in, it's going to devastate us. So I want you to agree with me. We're going to pray that hurricane away. So put your hands on your TVs." I'm paraphrasing what he said. It's all in verbatim in the book. "I want you to put your hand on the TV and pray with me." And he came and said, "The foul spirit of Satan in this storm, we're commanding you to turn away," and blah, 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 blah. And they ended the prayer and they went off the air. Guess what happened?
They
Well, you
got
wouldn't
hit.
know. No, you wouldn't know about it because you weren't that intimate at CBN. Pat Robertson had a stable near his house on the property. He had a couple horses in there that were worth well over $100,000 a pop. So CBN security got a call from Pat saying, "Hey, I want you guys to get down there and load up all the horses in the stable and take them about 3 hours inland, and just in case the hurricane hits us."
Huh.
Now, wait a minute. A couple of pieces of scripture came to mind. "O ye of little faith, didn't you just pray for
Uh-huh.
the hurricane to go away?" And what kind of a faith move is that? Where you're not trusting God for your prayer, you're going to move your horses?
Uh-huh.
So they
Yeah.
did. Security packed up all the horses, took them 3 miles to 3 hours inland. Now, fast forward, the storm veered away. The storm veered away, but it ping ponged up the coast and hit New Jersey really hard and hit some of the New England states really hard. A lot of people died and it did millions and millions and millions of destruction, of property damage. So Pat came on the air the next day and was going, "We did it. We prayed the storm away. We're all intact here at Virginia Beach." And of course, he didn't mention the horses, but you know, we're all safe. Thank you. Your prayers, your mighty prayer, your warriors, blah, 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 blah. And now his two co-hosts, Danuta and Ben Kinchlow, asked, "Well, Pat, but did you hear that the storm bypassed us, but it ping-ponged up the coast and it hit New Jersey and New England and killed a lot of people and did a lot of uh, physical damage, millions of dollars of damage. What do you think about that?" Well, I guess they just didn't pray hard enough.
Oh my God. Well,
Yeah.
that you know what that that does lead me. I got two more quick questions for you, but that does lead me to one of the questions I had for you.
Okay. All right.
As I mean, as his bodyguard, I would assume that there was kind of a line that personally that you don't cross with him, but did you ever have conversations with him about the road he was going down? Like, this isn't a ministry anymore. This is not what I signed up for. Like, what are you doing? Or was that a line you kind of didn't want to cross?
I didn't feel I was in a position to correct him. Pat was a smart man. He just was dumb in certain areas. And one of them was discernment with people. And I mentioned that earlier. If people came up to him and had a really good line and mentioned loving the Lord and they were going to help CBN make a lot of money, you were in. In fact, I told him one day, I said, "Pat, I said, you got no discernment with people." I said, "If Charles Manson, the mass murderer, drove up here in a Mercedes Benz wearing $1,000 suit and sporting a Rolex watch, you'd make him a vice president of CBN." He goes, "I'm not that bad, am I?" I said, "You're worse." I said, You have no discernment when it comes to people." He hired some of the biggest dumbbells. And I don't know if that was secretly his plan because Pat always was driving the bus. Even if it was from the back seat of the bus, he was still orchestrating things. But other than the time I told him that, you dance with the one you brought that brought you to the dance, You got to where you are because of ministry. You didn't get here because of politics and multi-level marketing. He just would glaze over. He just look at me like, you're just a dumb security guard. And, I'm Pat Robertson and I'm light years ahead of you. So no, and answer your question is no. I didn't feel it was my job, wasn't my part, and it would probably get me fired. He probably would have just said, I don't need to take crap from this guy. There's 1,000 big lugs can keep me awake or alive. So, and no, you didn't. I felt sorry for Pat because I saw him for a number of years, and I couldn't tell you gospel truth whether or not he had a best friend or not.
Hmm.
He knew a hell of a lot of people,
Right.
but I don't think he had a guy that he could call up at 3 a.m. saying, "Hey, I'm having issues, and I really need to talk to somebody." And that's a weak spot to be in.
That's
That's
sad.
a horrible spot for a Christian man to be in. So I think that's my assessment of him. I may be totally wrong, but uh, the only time I saw a real tender side to Pat was when his wife had um, breast cancer surgery, and he was very tender to her, uh, and during her recovery. And Dee Dee was a smart woman. If he had listened more to her, I don't think he would have gotten into such trouble. She was smart. She had a master's in nursing, written several books. She was
Yeah.
brutally honest with Pat. And in fact, quickly, Pat did a remote interview with Larry King one night when he was uh, pre-campaign stuff. And Pat was pretty smart about financial stuff. And he got off on a tangent and was throwing numbers, billions and zillions, and to Larry King and everything. And Pat got done with this little segment with Larry King. The cameras went dark and he stepped off the platform, and I call them his political gerbils. They would all cuddle around him, tell him how great he did. Oh, Pat, you were strong. You were marvelous. Oh, great job, Pat. Great job, Pat. And then he turned to Dee Dee and goes, "Well, my love," he says, "how do you think I did?" She says, "You were horrible." He goes, "What?" And then the gerbils around go, "Oh, well, you weren't that horrible, Pat." And Dee Dee nailed it. She says, "Pat, you forgot who your audience was. These are people sitting in their homes eating their TV dinners, watching Larry King. They don't understand billions and zillions and stock market fluctuations and all this stuff. They're wondering how they're going to feed their family next week." And she was dead right. So yeah, I mean, I think he was a pretty lonely guy, to tell you the truth. But I may have been wrong, but that's my assessment.
Finally, um, finally, I mean, and this might be I don't know if it's too much for you or not, but how did it affect you when you found out he'd passed away?
I really loved Pat. Um, I mean, I loved him to the point where when he asked me to take over security, I actually put my real life's goal in the garbage disposal. That was the animation studio. And it just kind of tanked after that. CBN was a funny place. They'd throw a lot of money at something, and then about 2 years in, they'd pull that money and start another thing, and you were either swimming or sinking. I loved Pat, especially in the early years, just a real tender man. Um, we'd go, we were walking in New York City one time, went on a walk one night. It was so weird because CBN dealt with a lot of cash, and there'd be times I'd be out on a trip with them. I'd have $10,000 in cash in my suit pocket because they wouldn't give us a credit card to pay for the rooms and stuff. So here we are walking down pretty dicey areas of New York City, a lot of homeless guys. And Pat would go, "Give that guy 20, give that guy 20, give that guy 20." I felt like I was sowing seeds, and here, we didn't stop long enough to engage him in conversation, but he had a heart for people. And when he started off, he started in Bedford Stuyvesant area of New York. I mean, it was a rough place, People don't know Pat Robertson was a blue blood. He was born a blue blood. His dad was a lifetime senator from Virginia. He grew up in the elite schools. He didn't lack for anything, and he surrendered a lot of that over his beginning years. Ate a lot of soybeans, and lived in a tenement, and it was not easy. But absolute power corrupts absolutely, and he had absolute power at CBN. I always used to joke. I said, if Pat tells the board of directors he wants all the buildings painted pink, there'll be painters out today. Nobody's going to talk back to Pat Robertson. You don't talk back to him and survive. So he had carte blanche. He had absolute power. The political stuff fed his ego. I think you have all these people telling him you're going to be the president and you're going to turn this country around, and it lasted about as long as a fart in a whirlwind. But that's what God had in mind. I think God pulled his blessing from him ministerially and said, okay, you want to go off and chase man, you're gonna be a little hungry for a while. And I think he panicked, and I think he started doing all these get rich quick schemes and everything. And no, I didn't hate Pat. I didn't cry. I felt kind of relieved because he really started looking bad the last few years. I mean, he almost, somebody told me, he said he looks like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. And I thought, well, that's kind of cruel, but Pat was 6'3.5" in his heyday. He was on a cane. He was about 5'10", hunched over, comb over. Just, mine was, I think, still pretty sharp, but the body had betrayed him. He should have been off the 700 Club several years before that. And we used to joke in security. We said, it sounds like we were callous, but we did something to keep our sanity. We said, Pat's probably going to die on the air at the 700 Club. They're going to go to a commercial, come back, and they'll cue him to speak, and he'll just be like that. We'll have to go put a mirror under his nose and see if he's still breathing or not, because that was his life. That was his life. That was his reason for living, was that club. He was in a pulpit 5 days a week in millions of people's homes, and he could get away with whatever he wanted to say, and he did. But a lot of it jumped back and bit him. But anyway, I've gone on way too long, but I'm very passionate about the subject.
Man, you are fine, man. David, thank you so much for doing this today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Both books available on Amazon right now, at your website, Big Fat Cat, right?
Big Fat Cat Books. And then if they want to hear some of the excerpts, kind of subcategories from the books, go to theflimflamchronicles.com. I've got about a dozen or so 8-minute narratives telling you all about how Ralph Reed should have gone to prison. And then I just uploaded 4 of them about Pat Robertson, early days of CBN and how it came to be. And I've got about 10 more to do for him. So they don't cost you anything on Flim Flam. You can go and listen to it and see if you get interested. Order the books. I'd like the books to go viral because people really need to know. We got people out there like Kenneth Copeland flying around in $300 million jets, and these guys living. That's not godly. That's obscene. When you got veterans laying in the streets of our major cities, starving to death, they got no place to live, and you got godly men, that are, yeah, major air quotes on that. It's sad. So anyway, go to the websites, listen, get some feedback, send me how you think. If you think I'm a spawn of Satan, let me know. If you think I'm on the right track, let me know. I'm fine.
I love it. Then David, thank you so much for doing this today. I'm so glad we were able to finally make this happen. We'll have to do it again sometime.